So I'm going to be talking about how do I drive ongoing sustainability and longer term adoption. And a big part of mine is around the management pieces. And it's curious because unengaged management just came up as one of your poll answers as to what's to blame. And there's also a little nugget there in the earlier poll. So I'm going to connect to that in just a moment. But at the end of the day, full adoption is relying on behaviors. And it's behaviors of, it's the manager's behaviors, which we'll get to, but there are typically 3 reasons why people aren't doing the behaviors to use the full functionality of a tool, process, or program. And you see those in the center of this model here. It's because maybe they don't know they're supposed to, so they're unclear of what your expectations are, or maybe they don't believe that you mean for them. Oh, you don't mean me. I've been here forever. You mean everybody else, right? No. So they don't know they're supposed to. That could be one reason why they're not doing what it is you expect them to do in terms of using the full functionality of a tool, process, or program. Another reason, though, could be that honestly, they just don't know how to. At the bottom there, they may not know how to do and use what it is you're expecting them to do. Or the third, off to the right there in purple, yeah, they know they're supposed to and they know how to, but they just don't want to. Very real. And those are 3 different barriers to execution, 3 different, very real reasons as to why people don't do whatever it is you're expecting them to do. And if we look on the outside circle of this model here, that gives us, the manager, some guidance and to help inform what the manager might need to do to address it depending on where they think their colleague, their employee is. So if they don't know supposed to, it's around focus or manage behaviors. They don't know how to, develop or coach behaviors. Don't want to, that means I as a manager might need to lean into some of my motivate or lead behaviors. So we're going to unpack each of those in just a moment. But at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, adoption is a contact sport. Training, incentives, system integration, all those things really do matter, but to really get full adoption, long-term sustainability, which is what I'm talking about now, it must be driven by management and their engagement with their people. That's why we say it's a contact sport. So I can't beat that drum any louder here. It really does matter. So let's unpack, okay, what's getting in the way during execution and what to do about it. Let's look at each of the 3 barriers and their solutions. And unfortunately, we know that managers are sometimes their own worst enemy, and they are doing things that drive low adoption, the opposite of what you want. So for example, when we see this stuff all the time, managers are setting very general expectations, or there's too many expectations. That might sound like, Susan, just do all those things that you were trained on in the class. Right? Or managers are only holding people accountable for the basic activities. Well, you just got to get the opportunity into Salesforce in order to get paid. Or they could be only holding select people accountable and letting some people off the hook. Maybe it's your high performers, for example. And then another thing that managers often do is provide vague and infrequent feedback. That might sound like, well, Julie, you need to use Salesforce more. What does that do for me? So, and another significant issue that we see, again, managers shooting themselves in the foot, is we see organizations where only the salespeople are expected to use the tool. And management doesn't integrate the use of the tool into their own routines, like their one-on-ones. That's a huge deterrent to adoption. So a really big piece. So let's talk about an example of high adoption with one of our banking clients as they were driving adoption of their new sales and service process. So not a technology tool, but a process. And in this example, every level of leadership, every level of management and people had expectations set on what was to be done and what it looked like. Each had the expectations also customized for their current level and their level of execution expectations. That was one piece. Also, everyone was held accountable at each level in the organization, and even managers who they knew were hesitant, those folks were even held accountable, so that the execution of the process would be driven consistently across the entire organization. And third, everyone was given quality feedback during their one-on-ones and during observations. And again, that was done at every single level. So it was totally a unified effort to help address the don't know, supposed to through the management and the focusing actions. That's one piece. And let's look at the other piece. So what if, yes, they know they're supposed to, they're clear on that, but they don't know how to? And so when the performance barrier is don't know how to, let me give you some examples of behaviors that we see managers doing that are driving low adoption as related to this one. Managers unfortunately assume that they are not personally responsible for training or developing their people on the use of the tool or the process of the program. They assume the training department took care of that and addressed everything that needed to be done. And we see that happen a lot. Another thing that happens is when successes, when they do occur, are acknowledged, but too vaguely and just with some general praise, like, hey, Nicole is doing a great job using the system, and that's it. And this kind of praise really does nothing to help those who really want to know how to do something, how to do it better. And these examples of low adoption behaviors, they apply to management as well. That means the managers of managers, they need to be training their frontline managers how to apply the training that was provided, if any training was provided. But if you were with Nicole, you got a ton of training, right? But the managers of managers need to be talking about that. So what does good look like in this case when they don't know how to? What does good look like? Well, you'll see on the left, no show do. Managers really working with individuals and the team, ensuring that all know what to do and what it looks like. They show or model how it's done and then get the colleagues to demonstrate or do the activity. Another dimension is the use of ongoing scenario training. And managers who are really committed to adoption are continually facilitating training on the more advanced applications of the tool or the process of the program to help drive some comfort, confidence, and competence in their teams and their colleagues. And then that third piece is sharing and propagating best practices. Managers really being on the lookout for best practice application of the tool. And they then ensure that the best practice is shared with all. And that's something that pulls through from initial adoption, really sharing and collecting and sharing best practices. So there's a thread pulling through all this. Let me give you an example of high adoption with that same banking client who has been driving adoption of that new sales and service process. In this bank, the branch managers and the district managers built role plays and sharing of best practices into their one-on-ones. So standardized in their one-on-ones and their team meetings, all of them, to ensure that their sales and service process was being done better and better and better. And they all had this mantra and they all had this routine and rhythm built in around don't know how to and how do I develop and coach. So that's that performance barrier. Now let's tackle what sometimes is the nemesis for so many managers that don't want to. So when a colleague doesn't want to do what you expect them to do around the use of the tool, the process, or the program, what does that really mean? And I'm loving that this one, I love this one anyway to tackle it because it's so real. But in that very first poll, you all answered for what stands in the way. The number one thing was reluctance. I don't wanna, I'm reluctant. That's what we're hitting here. So what does that mean? Well, unfortunately, we sometimes see managers, again, supporting that and inadvertently driving low adoption when they do a few things. They might introduce a new tool or a process and they talk about how valuable it is That's a good thing, you might think. But they talk about it, oh, it's really valuable to our company and to our customers, but they don't mention what's in it for the colleague, for that individual, for that banker. And the other thing they do is sometimes companies, they mean well, and they'll talk about the why we're doing this and why it's really important, but they only do it at the point of introduction when the thing rolls out. And then it's not revisited or heard about later. So those are two things that managers and organizations are doing. They're shooting themselves in the foot. Managers also, we see them express their own doubts, their own hesitations about the tool or the process in front of their people. So management many times might agree with their colleagues, and they continue to use or ask their people to use old systems versus requiring them to adopt the new one. My favorite one, and I know you all have experienced this, is when pipelines continue to be run on Excel spreadsheets instead of the CRM, and that you allow that to happen. Managers, again, shooting themselves in the foot around adoption. Another thing managers do is agreeing with their colleagues that, yeah, the tool or the process, it is hard, it is difficult, it's less than ideal. Don't do that. And unfortunately, management often unintentionally, slows down adoption by expressing their own negative opinions and their biases against the tool or that process or that program. And so let me give you some good behaviors, because I gave you so many things that we see managers are doing which are not helping their cause. Good behaviors, you see these on the slide. Answer why. Managers are continuously explaining why the tool, the process, or the program is of value. Keep beating that drum. Reconcile negative beliefs. And what that means is managers need to have the leadership courage to ask why colleagues aren't adopting the tool, and then addressing the beliefs or the attitudes which may be they truly could be based on some misinformation or some inaccurate information, but having the courage to go there. And then that third one, reinforce what's in it for them. The colleague, managers need to continually point out why the behavior that's being asked of them is of value to that individual, to really connect to their personal motivators, what they care about individually, one-on-one. And I'll give you a final example with that bank who's in the process of adopting this new sales and service process, and what they've done really well. So the branch managers and the district managers were expected to continually remind everyone of the value of doing the new sales and service process, to the value to the customers, but also to the individual colleagues. And they would do this overtly. Again, it was baked in. Julie talked about baking things in, or Nicole talked about that, baking things into their one-on-ones and during their team meetings. So really important things to do there. So just in closing out this pieces, I cannot stress enough the importance of the manager's behaviors in driving high adoption ongoing. They certainly are important in that executive engagement during the initial adoption, but ongoing, absolutely critical.